One of the perspectives that I have on working with students who have emotional and behavior concerns, and really any student for that matter, is that behavior is always communication. So when a student is having some type of behavior or using some type of behavior, what that student is doing is communicating something. And I think about this in just in my own life or in my life as a parent. If my daughter happens to be grumpy, is it because she didn't get enough sleep? Is she stressed out about a test that's coming up? Is she hangry? This is why I'm always grumpy. I get hangry. As this school year wrapped up, I remember one day that my daughter wanted me to help her with an essay that she had to write for class. She was a little uncertain of the topic, and she was kind of having a hard time reading the passages that she was going to write the essay about. And basically, she wanted me to do it for her, which I'm not going to do. And so the deal I made with her was that if she would create an outline for the essay, that I would help her write it and provide her feedback. And so we'd scheduled a specific time to do that. And I know that I had been busy in the morning and had come home at lunch to help her. And it was just one of those days where I was a little busier and a little more pushed than I needed to be. And so when I got home from lunch, I hadn't sort of detached from work, and I was kind of in that frantic, I got a lot to do today mode. And she hadn't made the outline that we'd talked about, and I was kind of grumpy with her. And so we worked for a little bit, and then I ended up heading back to work. And later I sent her a text message, and I said, hey, I'm sorry, I was grumpy. I was kind of involved in some things going on at work. And I said, I know your paper's due on Friday. Let's set aside these 3 hours on Friday, and I will give you 100% of my attention. And so I had to know within me that I was being grumpy because something that was going on within myself. And I don't think I am always capable of, when I feel a certain way, having enough self-awareness to be able to articulate, okay, I'm feeling this way now because. And I would consider myself to be a pretty emotionally intelligent and a pretty self-aware person. And so if I know that I have challenges in that area, as I think about my students, especially younger students who are maybe in the third grade or the second grade or the first grade, are those students ever going to be capable of this level of self-awareness that is needed to say, okay, I'm feeling this, and I'm going to directly tell you that this is how I'm feeling and why I'm feeling that way. And I don't think most of our adolescent and prepubescent students are really capable of that level of self-awareness. And so this is why I go back to the statement that behavior is communication. I remember this would have been in my first teaching job. I was working with this young woman named Nicole, and we'd had quite a history with Nicole. When Nicole came to our program, she was really out of control, and she could flip just in a moment. And when she flipped, like, computers got flung across the classroom and big heavy tables got turned over, and it was really dangerous. And so the program hired probably a fifth paraprofessional to work in the classroom, someone specifically to be there when safety needed to be maintained based on Nicole's explosions. And what we noticed was that anytime that particular para got near her, she would have an explosion. So this had become really counterproductive. And I remember about 3 weeks in, her therapist came to me after school one day and said, hey, I think I've got a clue as to why Nicole isn't doing so well with this paraprofessional. And I was like, well, clue me in. And she said, I think that he wears a cologne that is almost like the cologne of someone who abused her over a long period of time, right? So light bulb moment. I said to the paraprofessional, I was like, do you have any plans tonight? And he didn't. And so I said, I'm taking you to one of the nearby towns, and we're going to go to the department store and we're going to buy you some cologne. And his response was, well, do I stink? And I was like, no, don't ask questions. We'll talk about it later. And so I explained the situation, and he changed colognes, and Nicole's reaction to him changed significantly. And we were just sort of lucky to figure that out, right? But behavior, again, communication. And so Nicole was with us for months, and she really was able to respond to the structure of the program and do much, much better. She got to the point that we didn't have to always sort of have one eye on her, and really she became one of my forever favorite students. And so as it existed in that program, as you did better, eventually you were integrated back home. And this happened after a series of steps where families would come and do therapy and then take their students out for a day in the community and then an overnight in the community. And then there was what was called a home visit, where the student left our facility and spent the night or the weekend back with their family. And as that became nearer and nearer, Nicole could not stop talking about it. How excited she was to go home, how excited she was to be with her mom, how excited she was to have home cooking, the different fast food that she knew she was going to try. But I found myself in my white shirt the morning of the Friday of her home pass with her in the nurse's office while she got stitches in both hands because she had punched out a safety glass window. And that behavior was communication. Nicole was never going to say that it wasn't safe for her to go home. She would not have been able to save face with her peers if she'd said that. But that behavior indicated very clearly that home was not a safe place for Nicole. Now, that's a very extreme example, but behavior is communication. I tried very rarely to be absent from a classroom because honestly, creating sub-plans and then finding a sub that could really understand the students I worked with was really difficult. So I tried not to be gone, but in days that I was gone, I would become really frustrated when I would come back and I would read notes from a sub who said, Johnny really had a lot of attention-seeking behaviors today. And the big trick, if we think that behavior is communication, is determining what the behavior is communicating, right? The antecedent of the behavior. And if a substitute teacher or anyone is able to recognize that a student is having attention-seeking behavior, a need for attention is causing the behavior, and the absence of positive attention will lead to behavior that gets negative attention. 90% of the problem is solved right there because you can simply provide attention to that student. And I know that it's true that we have students who need attention, and we can't always provide one-on-one attention for every student at every time. But when it comes to attention, the nice thing is, or the handy thing is, a student can feel like they're receiving attention even if we're not interacting with them. And so think about when you were in school, were you ever the person who got to feed like the classroom hamster or the classroom fish that week? When we have roles within our classrooms, when we have a responsibility, we feel like that's getting attention. I remember one teacher who would have a student run down to the office to deliver a note to the school secretary. And she did this all the time. And she would sort of see a behavior incident coming along, and so she would scribble out a note and she would hand it to the particular student and say, go ahead and take this down. I need to get this message to Miss Smith really, really quickly, and I know I can trust you to do it. And the notes would always say something to Miss Smith that was like, hey, I just needed this student out of the classroom for a couple minutes, wait about 30 seconds and send him back, right? And so this was a total ruse as it relates to the student. But that student felt like you picked them to do a job, that you trusted them to do a job, and that's providing really high-level attention without taking your attention away from the other students or the lesson. And so we know that behavior is communication. We know that it's super tricky to figure out what the behavior is communicating because we know that not all students are self-aware enough, and nor should they be, to always communicate exactly what they're feeling at any given time. So when we think about behavior, if we can apply these lessons to behavior, then we begin looking at behavior as something a little different. When I was student teaching, there was a student who came to class every morning, and I student taught at a middle school in the 6th grade, and she fell asleep for the first period of class every single day. And we sort of had this homeroom. It wasn't an academic time. We did sort of non-academic relationship building things during that time. And I remember after the first week saying to my cooperating teacher, do we need to do something about the student who falls asleep? And he said, well, what do you think we should do about it? And I'd read the student faculty handbook as a part of my orientation. And I said, well, the handbook says that we send them to the office and they stay after school and yada, yada, yada. And he said, do you think that's a good idea? And I said, well, you're asking the question, so I'm guessing it's not a good idea. And he gave me the context that this sixth grade girl, her mom was a single parent. She had 4 younger siblings, and the mom worked 3 jobs. And so this sixth grade girl was the person who woke her brothers and sisters up in the morning, gave them breakfast, got them on the school bus, and then got herself to school. And after school, she was the one that cared for them and got them dinner and supervised their homework. And she had this very adultized set of experiences. And so the cooperating teacher explained to me that, this homeroom, we're not doing anything academically. She's exhausted because she's living this life with responsibilities that are far beyond that of a 6th grader. And so if I let her sleep for this 45 minutes of homeroom, and that allows her to be awake and able to have contact with the curriculum during her academic classes, I'm going to let her do that. And I know that that wasn't following the letter of the law, but it certainly took in the context of the situation. And in that cooperating teacher's mind, and probably mine as well, it served a greater good. So we have to continually ask, what is that behavior trying to communicate?